Tonight we drift into a world shaped by fire, myth, and the quiet footsteps of a lone wanderer. A world where mountains whisper ancient warnings, where rivers glow red beneath the moonlight, and where a single man, half legend, half forgotten truth, carried a stolen flame across continents, changing every place he touched. Before we begin this journey, take a moment to settle in. For those watching from the U.S., where the evening air is settling around your homes, from Europe, where midnight thoughts start to soften, from Canada, wrapped in winter blankets, and from every corner of the world, no matter the time on your clock, thank you for being here tonight. If you enjoy stories like this, whispered slowly under dim light, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Then take a deep breath, unclench your shoulders, and let yourself drift into the world of rising ash, glowing embers, and the man who walked the earth carrying a flame not meant for mortals. Now, settle deeper. Close your eyes, if you wish. The story begins quietly, with a volcano that never slept, and a man who dared to climb it. High in a forgotten corner of the world, where the wind carried the scent of heated stone and the distant hum of molten earth, rose a mountain the villagers simply called the Sleepless One. It towered above forests of blackened bark and valleys shaped by centuries of trembling ground. At night, its peak glowed faintly, an ember against the dark sky, breathing slow curls of smoke like an ancient creature dreaming restlessly. The villagers who lived at the base of this volcanic giant believed it was alive, not in the way beasts breathed or trees grew, but in the deep, rumbling way the earth remembers its creation. They said its heart burned with a fire older than time, a fire that no mortal should ever touch. For generations, parents whispered warnings to their children, "Do not climb the mountain of fire. Do not wake the sleepless one. Its flame is not meant for human hands." But even warnings fade under the weight of curiosity. And among these villagers lived a man named Tarek, quiet, slender, with eyes like cooled obsidian. From childhood, he would sit outside his home at dusk, watching the mountain breathe its red breath into the sky. While others feared it, he felt a strange pull, as though the volcano whispered secrets only he could hear. He never told anyone, but there were nights he dreamed of walking through glowing caves, his footsteps echoing against walls shaped by fire. As the years passed, the mountain's rumble grew louder. Birds abandoned the trees. Animals hid deep in the forest shadows. Even the bravest hunters no longer ventured near. The villagers feared an eruption. They gathered each evening to pray for safety, for mercy, for time. But Tarek, he prayed for clarity. One dawn, soft, mist-filled, and eerily warm, he stood at the base of the volcano alone. The earth beneath his feet trembled lightly, as though acknowledging his presence. With a slow breath and a racing heart, he placed his hand against the black obsidian slope. The stone pulsed with heat. It felt like a greeting. And so, with the sky brightening behind him, Tarek took his first step upward. Each footfall was careful, measured, echoing softly on the ancient stone. The air thickened with the smell of sulfur. The world below faded into silence. He climbed toward the place everyone else feared, toward the heart of the Sleepless One. The journey had begun. The climb grew steeper as Tarek moved higher, each step drawing him deeper into the mountain's breath. The air shimmered with rising heat, bending light into rippling waves that danced before his eyes. Ash drifted softly from above, settling on his shoulders like gray snow, warm to the touch, almost gentle despite its fiery origin. Birdsong was long gone here. Only the deep, hollow hum of the earth remained. Every so often a muted boom echoed from somewhere beneath the stone, like a giant shifting in its sleep. The ground trembled under Tarek's feet, subtle but constant, a reminder that the mountain was very much alive. Yet he did not turn back. Instead, he paused to steady his breath, feeling the heat seep into his skin, into his bones, as though the mountain was testing him, measuring him. The path narrowed into a ledge carved by ancient lava flows. Jagged black rock rose on his left side, while on the right, a sheer drop vanished into a swirling mist of ash. The world felt distant here, quiet, suspended, unreal. Tarek walked slowly, placing each step with the caution of someone reading a forgotten language written into the earth. Along the cliffside, he noticed something strange. Markings etched into the stone, not the work of nature, symbols, spirals, lines that connected like a map made by someone who had walked this path before him. They glowed faintly, not with light, but with warmth, warm as breath, warm as living skin. He traced one cautiously with his fingertips. The stone responded with a soft pulse. The same pulse he had felt at the base of the mountain. His heart quickened. He was not the first. Someone, long ago, had climbed this path with purpose. The wind shifted, carrying with it a deep, rolling exhale from the crater above. A wave of heat washed over him, and for a moment the world blurred. He closed his eyes and steadied himself. When he opened them, the symbols ahead seemed clearer, brighter, as though guiding him. Tarek followed them upward. The mountain, in its strange and ancient way, was opening a path. Soon the ledge widened into a plateau of smooth obsidian, gleaming under the haze of ash. Pools of molten rock glowed like scattered stars across the dark ground. The heat rose in shimmering curtains, but beneath it all, Tarek felt something else. A presence watching him, ancient, patient, curious. He whispered softly into the glowing air, unsure if he was speaking to the mountain or to himself. "I'm here to understand." In response, the ground tremored gently. A welcome or a warning? He continued forward. Tomorrow would change everything. But tonight, the mountain was still testing him. As Tarek stepped deeper into the obsidian plateau, the mountain shifted beneath him, almost imperceptibly, a slow, rippling vibration that traveled through the stone like a heartbeat. Ahead, half hidden by drifting ash, yawned a dark opening carved into the mountainside. It was not a crack, nor a natural crevice. It was an entrance. The air around it pulsed with warmth, and from within came a soft rhythmic sound, like breath, like whispering. Tarek approached cautiously. The obsidian walls around the cave mouth were smooth, almost polished, reflecting faint red glows from the molten pools scattered across the plateau. Strange markings, similar to the ones on the cliffside, encircled the entrance. These symbols were sharper, more deliberate, etched deep into the stone by hands that seemed both ancient and skilled beyond explanation. He brushed his fingers across the nearest symbol. Heat flared beneath his touch, gentle but alive. The symbol lit briefly, glowing like an ember, and somewhere deep within the cave, an echo responded. Tarek's breath caught. It was as if the mountain was speaking. He stepped inside. The temperature changed instantly, not hotter, but heavier. The air grew thick, carrying the scent of minerals and old earth. The walls of the cavern glimmered softly, streaked with veins of red crystal that pulsed like a slow, lifelike glow. Every sound he made, each step, each breath, returned to him in gentle, delayed echoes, as though the cavern was listening, repeating his presence back to him. The deeper he walked, the more the whispers grew. They were not voices, not exactly, more like the shifting of heated stone, the low murmur of lava coursing through hidden channels, the mountain murmuring its ancient memories. At times the whispers sounded almost like words, old words, forgotten words. Tarek felt them vibrate through his chest, as though the sound traveled through him instead of around him. The path led downward in a slow spiral, the glow from the crystal veins lighting his way with a soft, amber radiance. He reached out occasionally to steady himself, feeling the stone warm beneath his palm. Nothing here felt cold or lifeless. Everything seemed awake. Then, suddenly, the cavern opened into a vast chamber. Tarek froze at the threshold. The room was enormous, a cathedral of fire. Lava flowed in thin, glowing rivers across the floor, weaving between islands of dark stone like molten veins. From above, the ceiling rose into darkness, accented by drifting sparks that floated like fireflies. At the chamber's center stood a massive pillar of rock, its surface carved with spirals and symbols that shone like living flame. And atop that pillar, a single flame burned, small, steady, bright enough to cast gentle ripples across the entire cavern. It was unlike any flame Tarek had ever seen, pale gold tinged with white, quiet but powerful, as if the fire itself possessed a soul. His heart raced. This was the heart of the Sleepless One, the ancient flame no mortal had ever touched, yet somehow he knew it was meant for him. The whispers pulsed through the chamber, growing softer, warmer, like encouragement. Tarek stepped forward, drawn toward the impossible flame. His journey was only beginning. Tarek stood at the edge of the great chamber, his breath shallow, the soft glow of the pale golden flame reflecting in his eyes. The air around him trembled gently, warmed not just by heat, but by a kind of ancient awareness, as if the chamber itself had been waiting centuries for someone to step inside. He moved slowly, each step echoing softly against the cavern floor. The molten rivers whispered around him, their glow casting shifting patterns across the dark stone. Sparks drifted lazily through the air, weightless, like tiny wandering stars. Everything felt alive. As he approached the central pillar, the markings carved into its surface brightened. The spirals pulsed like a heartbeat, each glow timed perfectly with the soft trembling of the ground. It was as though the mountain was breathing, and the pillar was its chest. The flame atop it flickered lightly when he neared, not in warning, but in recognition. Tarek felt a shiver run through him, even in the heavy warmth of the chamber. A feeling stirred deep within his chest. Not fear, not even wonder, but something more intimate, like déjà vu, as though he had been here in some distant lifetime. He reached the base of the pillar. The heat radiating from it was immense, yet strangely gentle, as if the fire knew how not to harm him. The obsidian surface was smooth, warm beneath his hands. Using small footholds carved long ago, he slowly ascended the pillar, each movement careful and respectful, as though climbing toward a living spirit. When he finally reached the top, the flame stood before him. So small, so calm, yet so powerful that the air around it shimmered and hummed like a quiet melody. He crouched, mesmerized. The flame curved toward him, bending slightly like a creature lifting its face to study him. Its pale light illuminated his skin, tracing every line, every scar, every memory he carried. Then the whispers changed, no longer murmurs of stone and shifting lava, but something almost like a voice. Soft, warm, ancient. Tarek. His breath caught. He didn't know how he understood it. The flame didn't speak a language, not one he knew, yet its meaning flowed into him like heat into cold hands. It wasn't calling his name. It was recognizing him. He extended his hand toward the flame. At the moment his fingers neared the warm glow, the flame lifted from the stone, not rising, not leaping, but floating. Like a petal carried on a gentle breeze, it drifted into his palm, and instead of burning him, it melted into his skin, spreading warmth through his hand, up his arm, into his chest. A warmth that felt like purpose, like destiny, like waking from a long forgotten dream. His vision blurred, flooded with color and light. He saw flashes, memories not his own, ancient travelers walking across deserts at night, a village warmed by fire that never died, storms kept at bay by glowing embers, a world lit by a single flame shared across generations. And then silence, stillness, peace. When Tarek opened his eyes, the chamber was quiet again. The flame was gone from the pillar, but alive inside him. A soft glow pulsed beneath the skin of his palm, like a tiny sun resting in his hand. His journey was no longer a search. Now he carried the fire of the sleepless one, and the world beyond the mountain was waiting for what he would do with it. The chamber lay quiet behind him, its molten rivers whispering soft goodbyes as Tarek began his careful descent from the pillar. His steps were slow, deliberate, his senses sharpened by the living warmth now pulsing gently within his palm. The soft glow beneath his skin illuminated the stone, painting faint, golden arcs across the dark cavern walls. For the first time, he felt the mountain not as a towering danger, but as a companion, ancient, watchful, and strangely approving. The air had changed. Even the whispers had softened, as if the entire cavern exhaled with relief. Nothing pressed against him now. Nothing tested him. The flame had chosen. Tarek walked through the spiraling tunnel with a new sense of belonging. The red crystal veins flickered warmly as he passed, responding to the gentle light in his hand. Where before the cavern had echoed with warning and shifting stone, now it hummed with a lower, steadier rhythm, like a great heartbeat settling into rest. The warmth in his palm wasn't harsh. It was a quiet, steady thrum that spread up through his chest and into every breath he took. He didn't know what the flame intended for him. He only knew that it did not feel like a burden. It felt like guidance. As he stepped out of the cavern mouth, dawn was just beginning to break. The mountain's peak glowed softly beneath the rising sun, its smoke drifting lazily into the pale morning sky. Ash still floated in the air, but it no longer felt foreboding. Instead, it felt like snow left behind after a long storm. Tarek paused at the plateau, taking in the vast horizon. The world stretched out below him, forests draped in mist, rivers gleaming faintly in the early light, villages still asleep, unaware of the shift that had taken place in the heart of the volcano. For a long moment he stood quietly, listening to the steady hum of the flame within. It was small. It was quiet, but it carried a weight far greater than its size, and beneath that warmth was a whisper, not of warning, but of direction, down the mountain, into the world. Carry the fire, share its warmth, protect what it touches. Tarek closed his fingers gently around the faint glow. He felt the flame respond with a soft pulse, as if acknowledging his silent promise. He took his first step downward, and the mountain trembled behind him, not in anger or unrest, but in a slow, approving sigh. The sleepless one had given its fire to a mortal, and that gift was meant for more than a single village. As Tarek descended into the awakening world below, the morning light followed him, brighter, warmer, as though the sun itself recognized the flame he now carried. This was the beginning of a journey that would touch far more than his homeland. This was the first step of the messenger of fire. As Tarek neared the base of the mountain, the familiar scent of earth and morning dew returned, blending softly with the fading traces of sulfur that clung to his clothes. The world here felt quieter, gentler, as if it did not yet realize the change carried in the steady glow of his palm. Birdsong slowly returned to the air. Leaves rustled with a cool breeze that had been absent higher up. The forest, once trembling from the mountain's unrest, now seemed calmer, as though soothed by something unseen. Tarek paused at a stream, kneeling beside its clear water. His reflection stared back at him. But something was different. The same dark eyes, the same quiet expression. But beneath the surface of his skin, light flickered softly, like a lantern hidden beneath cloth. He cupped his glowing hand and watched the light ripple across the water. The stream brightened just faintly, as though greeting him, as though the flame, even contained within him, wanted to share itself. With a slow breath he continued onward. The village came into view. Dozens of small houses made of stone and wood, roofs glistening with morning dew. Smoke curled lazily from cooking fires. People were stirring, unaware that the man returning down the winding path was no longer the same one who had left the previous morning. A young girl gathering water at the village well saw him first. Her eyes widened. "Tarek?" she whispered, unsure if she should be frightened or relieved. He raised a hand in greeting. A faint glow pulsed beneath his skin. The girl gasped, her bucket clattering to the ground as she stumbled back. Others turned at the sound. Mothers paused mid-task. Elders leaned forward in disbelief. Children peeked from behind door frames, eyes wide. The village chief, a stern man with lines etched from years of worry, stepped forward slowly. "Tarek," he said cautiously, "you climbed the mountain. We feared—" He trailed off, his gaze falling to the faint golden shimmer in Tarek's palm. "What is that?" Tarek looked down at his hand. The warmth pulsed reassuringly. "A gift," he said softly, "from the mountain." The villagers murmured anxiously. Some whispered prayers. Others stepped back. A few stared with wonder, not fear. The chief approached, trembling slightly. "Show me." Tarek opened his hand. The glow expanded gently, illuminating the chief's weathered face. Not blinding, not harsh, just warm, comforting, like holding sunlit stone after a cool night. The chief inhaled sharply. "It does not burn you?" Tarek shook his head. "It guides me." The chief hesitated. Then, as though the warmth touched him too, his shoulders softened. His voice lowered to a reverent whisper. "The mountain chose you." The villagers grew silent. Children stepped closer, drawn by curiosity. The elderly leaned on their staffs, eyes shining. Mothers held babies near the light, watching as their infants cooed with unexpected calm. Tarek felt a swell of emotion. The flame within him pulsed, once, twice, as though greeting them all. But beneath its warmth, another feeling stirred, a pull, a direction. The flame wanted to be carried farther than this village. The world beyond the mountains was calling. Yet tonight, the first sharing of the fire had only just begun. That evening, the village gathered around Tarek as the sun dipped behind the mountain, leaving streaks of violet and gold in the sky. The air was cool, cooler than usual, as though the world itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. A large circle formed in the village's central clearing. Children sat cross-legged at the front, eyes glowing with excitement. The elders arranged themselves carefully, stiff from age, but alert with curiosity. Mothers and fathers kept close, whispering hopes and fears to one another. Tarek stood at the center, hands relaxed at his sides. The faint golden pulse beneath his skin flickered gently, like a small heartbeat of light. No one spoke for a moment. It was the kind of silence that felt sacred, as if words might accidentally disturb something important. Finally, the village chief stepped forward. "Tarek," he said quietly, "show us what the flame can do." Tarek nodded. He lifted his right hand, and as his fingers opened, the glow expanded, softly at first, then brighter, radiating warmth into the cool night air. Gasps rippled through the crowd, but the warmth wasn't like ordinary fire. It wasn't sharp or scorching. Instead, it felt like the first breath of morning sun, the comfort of heated stone after a long winter, the quiet embrace of safety. A baby began to cry somewhere in the back. But the moment the glow reached the child, the crying softened, then stopped, replaced by a peaceful coo. An elderly woman, hunched by years of cold nights, straightened slowly. Her eyes widened as the warmth eased into her joints. Then she smiled, a small smile, soft as a memory, the first she had shown in months. The villagers moved closer, timid at first. Tarek extended his hand, and the glow spread outward like golden mist, drifting gently across the crowd. It touched every face, every hand, every heart. People reached out instinctively, palms open, fingers trembling, as if hoping to catch a fragment of the warmth. And something miraculous happened. Where their skin met the light, small sparks formed, tiny harmless flickers of the same pale glow. They danced on fingertips, glimmered briefly on cheeks, then drifted into the air like luminous dust. The fire was not leaving Tarek. It was sharing itself. A collective breath filled the clearing. Many were moved to tears. One of the children approached him, a boy no older than 7, clutching a chipped wooden toy. He gazed at Tarek with round, earnest eyes. "Are you still Tarek?" the boy asked softly. The question settled over the gathering like falling dew. Tarek knelt to meet the child's gaze. He touched the boy's cheek gently, the glow tracing a soft arc across the child's skin. "Yes," he whispered, "but now I carry something meant to be shared." The boy nodded, not fully understanding, but sensing truth. As night deepened, the villagers sat with him in a circle, letting the warmth ease their worries, letting the light soften the dark. For the first time in many generations, fear of the mountain faded. In its place came hope, a quiet, glowing hope that wrapped the village in safety and calm. Tarek sat among them, feeling the flame guide his breath, his heartbeat, his purpose. It whispered softly inside him, not with words, but with direction. This is only the beginning. Beyond the forest, beyond the rivers, beyond the borders of all he had ever known, others were waiting. Others needed warmth. Others needed light. But for tonight, he remained with his people, sharing the fire until every heart felt at peace. The next morning dawned softly, with pale sunlight drifting through the forest and shimmering over the roofs of the village. A light mist hung in the air, curling gently around the houses, like a delicate veil. Birds sang with renewed energy, as though they too felt the warmth that had settled over the village during the night. Tarek stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the world wake. He felt the familiar glow in his palm, steady, warm, patient. It pulsed in a rhythmic, guiding beat, as though urging him gently forward. He had shared the flame, and now the flame was ready to be carried onward. Villagers gathered around him, their eyes a mixture of gratitude and worry. They had felt the warmth. They had witnessed its calming power. They knew it was a gift meant for more than this single circle of homes. The village chief approached, leaning heavily on his walking staff. "Are you leaving us?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with sadness. Tarek nodded. "The flame wants me to go," he said softly. "There are places where cold lingers longer, and hearts that have forgotten warmth." The chief studied him for a moment, then placed a weathered hand on Tarek's shoulder. "You carry something ancient," he murmured. "Treat it with respect, but also with courage." A small group of children ran up to him. One girl, her hair tied with a faded red ribbon, held out a small woven pouch. "For your journey," she said shyly. "It's empty now, but maybe you can keep something important in it." Tarek smiled gently and accepted the pouch. The flame within him pulsed warmly, as if acknowledging the gift. Mothers brought bread and dried fruits. Hunters offered him a sturdy walking staff carved from dark mountain wood. The elderly whispered blessings, tracing gentle circles in the air around him. When everything was ready, Tarek turned toward the forest path that led out of the valley. The morning breeze stirred the leaves, creating a soft, rustling music that sounded like a farewell. He took a deep breath and began to walk. Each step carried him farther from the place he knew, and closer to the destiny that waited beyond the horizon. The forest welcomed him with dappled sunlight. Birds flitted between branches. A soft breeze guided him forward, and through it all, the flame glowed quietly within his palm, providing a warmth that kept the morning chill at bay. Hours passed. The village disappeared behind the trees. The land shifted from soft forest to rolling hills. Wildflowers swayed gently on the slopes, their colors glowing under the sun. At midday, Tarek reached a high ridge overlooking miles of countryside. From here he saw distant rivers winding like silver threads, small towns leaning against the horizon, and mountains in the far distance, their peaks hidden by drifting clouds. A vast, waiting world. The flame pulsed in agreement. But as he continued down the ridge, Tarek noticed something unsettling. The air grew colder. The wind sharpened, and the sky dimmed just slightly, as though something ahead lay shrouded in an old, lingering chill. The flame warmed in response, as if preparing him. Tarek tightened his grip on the walking staff, the woven pouch at his side brushing gently against his leg. Whatever waited ahead, the flame would guide him through it. This was the beginning of a journey that would carry the warmth of the mountain into places that had forgotten light. And Tarek, the messenger of fire, took his next step into the widening world. By late afternoon, the warm hills gave way to a stark, unsettling stillness. The wind that had carried birdsong and the scent of wild herbs now grew colder. Not the crisp chill of evening air, but a hollow cold that seemed to seep from the ground itself. Tarek paused at the crest of a small rise. Below him lay a village tucked within a narrow valley, but something about it was wrong. No smoke rose from the chimneys, no voices drifted on the air, no movement stirred the quiet streets. The entire place seemed caught in a moment of breathless stillness. Tarek descended slowly, the flame in his palm warming with a soft, protective glow. The air around him grew colder with every step, as if the world here had been drained of warmth long before his arrival. When he reached the first row of houses, he saw frost clinging to the wood, thin white crystals creeping like fragile lace across windows and doors. It was strange. The day was mild, Yet the frost persisted, as though ignoring the sun. Tarek placed a hand gently against one of the frozen doors. His touch sent a tiny ripple of warmth through the wood, and for a heartbeat, the frost retreated, before growing back again as if resisting him. He moved deeper into the village. Each house he passed stood silent, a pale sheen of frost covering rooftops and fading into the streets. The cold here wasn't natural. It felt old, hungry. At the center of the village stood a well, encircled by stone benches. A frozen bucket still hung from its rope, a solid block of ice shimmering within. Then Tarek heard something, a faint brittle sound, like ice cracking underfoot. He followed it to a small home near the far edge of the village. Inside, through a frost-coated window, he saw movement. He approached with caution and pressed his glowing hand gently against the door. The warmth spread beneath his palm, melting the frost just enough for the wooden latch to shift. The door creaked open. Inside, a family huddled together, a mother, a father, and two small children, wrapped in blankets, their breaths shallow, their skin pale with cold. The mother stirred weakly when she saw him. Please," she whispered, her voice fragile as frozen leaves. "Who? Are you?" Tarek knelt, bringing his glowing palm closer to them. The children's eyes widened as the warmth brushed their cheeks. "I bring fire," he said softly, "not to burn, but to heal." The flame pulsed, softening the cold in the room, pushing back the frost inch by inch. The father managed a faint nod. "It came. So suddenly," he rasped. "A cold that spread through the village. We couldn't light our fires. Nothing would stay warm." Tarek listened as he let the glow seep through the home, warming the air, melting frost from the walls, stirring the faintest color back into their skin. "But why?" he asked gently. "What caused it?" The mother shivered, her voice trembling as she spoke. "A shadow from the northern woods. It passed through us like a winter wind. After that, the warmth never returned." Tarek felt the flame in his hand tighten. A soft, urgent pulse. The cold here wasn't natural. It was born of something deeper, something that challenged the very balance the flame protected. He stood slowly. "I will help the village," he promised, "and then I will find the source of this cold." The children clung to their mother, but their eyes followed him with newfound hope. As Tarek stepped back into the silent street, the flame flickered with determination. This valley had forgotten warmth, but he would return it, every home, every heart, one by one. The messenger of fire walked toward the next house, his glow brightening against the shadows of frost. By twilight, Tarek had brought warmth to several homes, but the cold in the village was persistent, a creeping, unnatural chill that lingered in the corners of houses and clung stubbornly to the edges of windows, as though trying to reclaim the spaces he had warmed. Each family he helped looked at him with a mix of awe and desperate hope. Some reached out to touch his glowing palm, feeling the soft, steady heat that seemed impossible in a place so frozen. Children followed him from house to house, their breaths forming pale clouds that melted into the warmer air trailing him. But even as he worked tirelessly, a question gnawed at him. Where had the cold come from? Night deepened across the valley, the sky dark and star-strewn. The moon rose in a silver arc, its pale light mixing eerily with the frost that still gripped the village's rooftops. Tarek walked toward the center of town, guided by the flame's gentle pull. He stopped at the old stone well, its rim glistening with frost despite the soft warmth he carried. The flame stirred in his palm, not with its usual calm pulsing, but with a sharper, more alert flicker. Tarek knelt and placed his hand on the edge of the well. The frost recoiled at his touch, but as the warmth spread downward, something beneath resisted, a cold so deep it could not be melted by gentle heat alone. He peered into the darkness, and deep inside, far below the surface, a faint light shimmered, not warm like his flame, but pale, blue, brittle. A cold fire. The air around him tightened. Frost crept back onto the stone despite his warmth. Tarek sat back on his heels. The cold was not merely lingering in the village, it was anchored, planted. And it came from something old, something powerful, something that did not want warmth to return. Footsteps approached behind him. He turned to see the village elder, an old woman with a cloak wrapped tightly around her thin shoulders. Despite the cold, her eyes shone with clarity. "You see it too," she said softly. Tarek nodded. "There is a cold flame inside the well, something unnatural." She settled beside him, her breath forming a trembling cloud. "We call it the frost-bound curse," she whispered. "A spirit of winter that once roamed the northern forests. Long ago it was banished by ancient guardians, but something has awakened it, something has stirred it from its slumber." Tarek looked back into the well. The pale flame flickered faintly, as though sensing his presence. "Why come here?" he murmured. The elder shivered. "Spirits seek imbalance. If the world grows warmer in one place, cold will push back somewhere else." Tarek felt the flame in his palm pulse, a soft, determined thrum that chased away his doubt. The elder placed a fragile hand on his arm. "You carry a rare fire, boy, a living flame. Perhaps the only thing that can face this spirit and restore balance." Tarek stood slowly, his gaze fixed on the well. The cold flame below shimmered again, a silent challenge. He tightened his grip on his walking staff, feeling the warmth travel through the wood. The night wind swirled around him, carrying whispers of frost and distant forests. The elder stepped back. "If you go north," she said, "you will find the heart of the spirit's domain." The flame in his palm warmed with quiet resolve. Tarek looked toward the northern woods, their dark silhouettes rising like ancient sentinels beneath the moonlit sky. His path was clear. Warmth must chase cold. Fire must meet frost. And he, the messenger of fire, would walk into the heart of winter to restore the world's forgotten balance. Before dawn, Tarek stood at the edge of the northern woods, a quiet boundary where warmth ended and cold began. Behind him, the frost-stricken village slept in a fragile peace. Fires rekindled in hearths, families wrapped in blankets warmed by his glow, hope flickering gently in every home. Ahead of him, the forest waited. Tall, ancient pines towered like dark pillars, their branches heavy with unnatural frost. Mist coiled between the trunks, thin and pale, as if woven from the breath of winter spirits. The ground beneath Tarek's feet crackled with every step, a thin crust of ice covering leaves that should have been soft and damp. He could feel the cold pushing outward from deeper within the forest, rolling in slow waves that prickled against his skin despite the warmth glowing in his palm. Tarek lifted his hand, letting the flame's soft pulse illuminate the twisted roots and frozen ferns. The light cast gentle amber reflections on the frost, creating shimmering patterns that danced along the trunks. The forest did not welcome him, but it did not reject him either. It simply watched. He moved forward carefully, breathing in the quiet air. Every sound, the distant crack of ice, the whisper of wind through stiff branches, the faint hum of the flame within, echoed with heightened clarity. Hours passed. The deeper he walked, the colder the forest became. The pines grew taller, older, their bark darkened to shades of slate and midnight, and the frost thickened, coating branches clinging to roots, turning fallen leaves into thin, glassy shards that shattered softly beneath his boots. Eventually the warmth in his hand surged suddenly, urgent and bright. Something was near. He paused beside a massive tree whose trunk was split by an ancient lightning scar. Frost coated the interior of the hollow like crystal teeth. Inside, a faint blue glow pulsed, the same cold shimmer he had seen in the village well. Tarek approached with caution. The cold radiating from the hollow was sharp, almost alive. It wrapped around his fingers like icy breath the moment he reached toward it. The flame in his palm brightened, not in fear but in recognition. He stepped back as a shape formed within the hollow. It began as mist, then condensed into a silhouette slender and tall, shimmering like frozen moonlight. Two eyes opened, glowing pale blue, the spirit of frost. Its gaze was ancient, unblinking, filled with a calm that was somehow colder than any winter wind. When it spoke, its voice was not a voice at all, but the sound of breaking ice, sharp and echoing. Bearer of stolen flame. Tarek swallowed, but did not step back. I did not steal it, he said quietly. It chose me. The spirit tilted its head, ice crackling softly along its form. Fire and frost are not meant to belong to mortals. Tarek lifted his hand. The warm glow cast a soft light across the spirit's crystalline face. I carry it to restore balance, not to control it. The spirit's icy breath curled outward, drifting through the air like winter fog. For a long moment neither moved. Warmth and cold hovered in stillness, two ancient forces meeting in one fragile space. Then the spirit whispered, "If you wish to restore balance, you must follow me." The hollow deepened into darkness behind the spirit, opening into a path of shimmering frost. Tarek tightened his grip on his staff. The flame warmed in his palm. Steady, sure, unafraid. He took a step forward. The spirit drifted deeper into the frozen passage, its pale glow guiding the way. And Tarek, the messenger of fire, followed it into the heart of winter. Tarek followed the frost spirit through the narrow passage, his breath curling in pale clouds, his footsteps muffled against ice-coated earth. The tunnel twisted like the inside of a glacier, its walls shimmering with shifting hues of silver and blue, as if frozen centuries were layered upon each other, pressing time itself into gleaming crystal. The flame in his palm pulsed softly, casting warm light that rippled across the icy walls. Where the glow touched, tiny droplets formed, warm water in a place untouched by warmth for generations. The spirit glanced back only once, its pale eyes flickering with what might have been curiosity or caution. Then the passage expanded. Tarek stepped into a vast circular chamber that seemed carved from pure winter. Tall pillars of ice rose like columns in a forgotten temple. Frost-laden vines hung from the ceiling, glittering like strands of white fire. The ground was covered in a smooth, glassy surface, a frozen lake, its depths swirling with faint hints of blue light. At the center of the lake stood a mound of gleaming frost, shaped like a throne or an altar, and atop it burned a flame, a cold flame, tall and pale as moonlight, its glow flickering with sharp edges like shards of crystal shifting in the wind. Tarek felt its cold from across the chamber. It was deep, ancient, the kind of cold that remembered the first winters before people walked the earth. The spirit drifted forward, its voice echoing like cracking ice. This is the heart of unborn winters, its gaze lowered. And it is waking. Tarek stepped closer, boots sliding slightly on the frozen surface. His warm flame flared instinctively, responding to the presence of its counterpart. He whispered, barely audible, "Why has it awakened now?" The spirit's form wavered, as though the question unsettled it. "Because the fire you carry rose once more," it answered. "Fire and frost are bound. When one strengthens, the other stirs." The words settled in the chamber like falling snow. Tarek's breath caught. So the cold in the village was a response to the mountain's flame? The spirit nodded. Balance must exist. Winter cannot sleep while fire roams freely. For a moment Tarek felt the weight of that truth. Had his receiving the flame awakened this ancient winter force? Had his journey unintentionally spread suffering? The flame in his palm warmed sharply, a comforting pulse as though reminding him, purpose, not guilt. He stepped toward the icy throne. The cold flame flickered violently, as if sensing his approach. The spirit moved to block him. "Do not attempt to extinguish it," it warned. "The heart cannot be destroyed, but it can be calmed, if fire and frost choose not to fight." Tarek lifted his glowing hand, the warmth spreading gently across the chamber. "Then tell me what I must do." For the first time the spirit's voice softened, still cold, still ancient, but touched with something like respect. "Let the flames meet." Tarek's pulse quickened. He looked from his palm to the icy fire atop the throne. Warmth and cold. Opposites, complements, each ancient, each powerful. The spirit drifted aside. "Bring your fire to the heart and let them speak." Tarek approached the cold flame, the air around him crackling with opposing energies. Warmth spiraling from his hand, frost swirling from the icy fire. He stood before it, feeling its chill seep into his bones, its presence immense, deep, commanding. Slowly, with a steadiness born of trust, he extended his hand. The warm flame glowed brighter, golden, soft, sure. The cold flame surged upward, silver, sharp, ancient. For a heartbeat, they hovered inches apart, the chamber holding its breath. And then the flames touched. Warmth met frost, light met shadow, gold met silver. A brilliant burst of shimmering light flooded the chamber, washing over the ice pillars, the frozen lake, the frost spirit, and Tarek himself. Not heat, not cold, but balance. The chamber trembled. The icy lake cracked, not breaking, but sighing as though relieved. And the cold flame softened, its glow no longer sharp, but gentle, settling into a calm, steady pulse that matched the warmth in Tarek's palm. The spirit bowed its head. The world remembers its harmony. Tarek exhaled slowly, his breath warm in the chilled air. The flames had spoken. The chamber fell into a peaceful hush, its icy pillars glowing with a soft new sheen, neither sharp with winter's bite nor clouded with frost's hunger. The frozen lake beneath Tarek's feet shimmered with a smooth, calm radiance, as though the very essence of winter had exhaled after a long, restless dream. Tarek stood before the once furious cold flame, now cooled into a serene, pale blue glow that pulsed gently, matching the steady warmth in his palm. The two lights, gold and silver, seemed to hum in quiet harmony, threads of warmth and frost, weaving into a single calm breath that filled the chamber. The frost spirit drifted closer, its form softer now, edges rounded instead of sharp, its presence no longer chilling, but cool and still, like a misty morning beside a silent lake. "It is done," the spirit murmured, its voice no longer a crack of ice, but a soft rustle of winter wind through snow-laden branches. "Fire and frost have spoken. The balance is restored." Tarek lowered his hand slightly, feeling the last echo of the balancing surge fade into his chest. He could sense it clearly, a gentle, perfect symmetry inside him. His warm flame no longer pushed outward in warning. It breathed peacefully, content, as if the world no longer needed it to defend itself. The frost spirit floated beside him, its dim light illuminating the chamber walls. "The village will thaw," it said. "The cold will lift as morning follows night." Tarek nodded, relief washing over him like a soft tide. He imagined children stepping outside to find their roofs dripping with melting frost, families warming themselves by fires that burned without struggle, people walking the streets without fear of the cold creeping beneath their doors. "Will the frost return?" he asked softly. The spirit tilted its head. "Winter always returns. But now, not with hunger." Tarek let those words settle into him, understanding their truth. Both fire and frost had their place. Neither was meant to dominate, only to balance one another as the world had always intended. He turned toward the passage that led back through the forest. "I must return," he said. "They're waiting." The spirit drifted alongside him for a moment, its pale blue glow casting soft glimmers across the icy walls. "Messenger of fire," it whispered, its tone respectful, almost reverent. "Your journey does not end with this forest. Wherever warmth fades, you may be called again." Tarek bowed his head. "I will go where I'm needed." The spirit receded into the chamber's depths, its presence dissolving into shimmering frost. As Tarek walked back through the frozen passage, the ice no longer pressed with biting chill. It was cool, quiet, restful, like a long winter preparing for spring. When he stepped into the forest, dawn was softening the sky. The frost on branches was melting in delicate beads of water, dripping gently into moss that had begun to glow green again. Bird song returned, faint at first, then blooming into a bright chorus that echoed between the trees. The path home felt lighter beneath his feet. By the time Tarek reached the village, the frost had thinned. Families were stepping outside, blinking in surprise as sunlight warmed their faces. Children ran through puddles forming from melting ice. Smoke curled from hearths freely once more. When they saw Tarek appear at the forest's edge, they rushed toward him, voices filled with relief, gratitude, laughter. The village chief grasped his shoulders. "What happened?" he asked breathlessly. Tarek looked at the thawed rooftops, the brightening valley, the warm smiles returning to the people he had come to help. "Balance," he whispered. "It has returned." The villagers gathered around him, their warmth mixing with the gentle sunshine of a renewed morning, and the flame in Tarek's palm pulsed once, soft, satisfied, like a quiet promise. The world had been cold, but warmth had walked into its heart and brought it peace again. And though his journey would continue into horizons yet unseen, for now, in this gentle morning, Tarek stood among his people as the messenger of fire who had rekindled a world forgotten by warmth. Thank you for traveling with Tarek on this peaceful, fire-lit journey. As the story settles softly into your thoughts and the night grows calm around you, I hope you find a quiet warmth within yourself too. A reminder that balance and peace can always be rekindled, Before you drift into rest, I gently invite you to like, subscribe, and share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you tonight. Your presence gives life to these stories. May your night be warm, your dreams soothing, and your heart calm. Sleep well, traveler.